Hello and welcome to England Cricket on 99.94. Cricket every day. I'm Daniel Norcross, a broadcaster, raconteur, dilettante, and podcaster. And I am joined once again, as I am every time,
As you must be.
by, it's the Whiff Waff, it's the puff pastry hangman himself. It is the Chief Cricket Writer of Press Association with a mug of tea in his hand, Rory Dollard. Today, we're going to be running the rule over, yes, we have to. The controversy at Lord's, goodness me, we've all got opinions about it. Let's try and distill them into something that's not really annoying, because we've heard nearly all the arguments before. But there's the occasional little nuance, and I got a really good idea from a bloke in the pub straight afterwards. That doesn't often happen.
Was it a second-hand car?
I mean, you get... No, I'll tell you all about it. It's amazing, because normally ideas you're given in the pub are absolutely dreadful, but this one isn't bad. England Cricket on 99.94 is your new home for, England Cricket content. We'll be dropping into your podcast feed and on YouTube or the 99.94 app 3 times every week. Thanks for joining Cricket's conversation. We are going to also take a look at the first few T20s, first 4 T20s that have been happening down in Pakistan, and zeroing in on the return of Mark Wood. But first off, okay, Rory, where do you sit on that? We can't call it a Mankad anymore because apparently it's bad, even though doing a Mankad is a sign of a great cricketing wisdom for half the population, and so isn't bad. So it gets very, very confusing there. The people who are in favour of it say you shouldn't use the word Mankad. The people who are against it say you should. We haven't even started on the rights and wrongs of it. We don't even know what to call it. Let's just say being run out at the non-striker's end before the ball has been released. Deepti Sharma did it, of course, to win the game at Lord's, to take the 10th wicket, a 10th wicket partnership that had been, it had been prospering, let us say. 37 runs they made. They needed another 16 to win the game, 17 to win the game in very unusual and extraordinary circumstances. And so Deepti Sharma couldn't get anybody else out. All the good bowlers had been bowled out. They couldn't get out the numbers 9 and 11. So they resorted to, had the wisdom to, were canny enough to, call it what you like, finish a marquee event at Lord's with a run out at the non-striker's end. Where do you stand on it?
Okay, well, I think Vinu Mankad has done his shift. That's fair enough. But I would be happy to, going forward, call it a Deepti or a Sharma, because, when you put yourself in that position, whether the rights or the wrongs of it, it's going to stick to you. So we can rebrand it for the next little while if we like. Yeah, Dan, I think as a way to end what was shaping up to be a really fitting end to the international summer in England, it was basically a load of old rubbish. I have called it the worst ending since Game of Thrones. It was highly disappointing. Now, that's not to get into the fevered debate about morality and legality and all that stuff. It's just to say that isn't enjoyable, I don't think. There's kind of a niche strand of people who seem to perversely celebrate it as a unique act of cunning and genius, and I'm not having that. Really, it's bad. It's not really something. I mean, I was watching it with my son Arthur, 7-year-old kid, and had to explain it all. And he was completely nonplussed about it. He was like, "That's not very good, is it?" he was quite enjoying the finish. So, who's to blame for that ending? That's where I suppose the armies and the battle lines up. And some people will tell you that Charlie Dean was completely in the wrong, always wandering out of her crease to sort of manage the percentages, I suppose, and gain an advantage. And others might say that Deepti was a little bit gamesmanship, and certainly I would take the opinion that she had never had any intention of bowling that ball. That it was a bit of a carnival trick to sort of wander her arm over with the intention of pulling out. Charlie Dean, it does seem was wandering out of her crease more than that on previous occasions. It just so happened that the ball that Sharma chose to run her out with the non-strikers, she was actually not that. I think it's touch and go as to whether, by the letter of the law, she was out of her ground at the normal release point. I'm not sure she was. I think the momentum carried her forward. Yeah. And had she not have continued forward and gone out, I don't know what Sharma would have done with the ball. I think she'd have pulled out of her action. So it's not.
Oh well, I'll tell you exactly what she'd have done. She'd have done what she's done on millions of occasions before. This is why I wasn't really particularly surprised by it, because I've watched Deepti Sharma play on numerous occasions, and the number of times she doesn't release the ball is utterly infuriating. I mean, I've seen her take 11 minutes over and over, and part of this is, that thing where the batter might have just moved by a fraction. Part of it is because she's actually thinking about pulling off the Mankad or the Deepti. And she's perfectly within her rights to do all those things. I find the conversation generally quite enervating, because it's usually split between basically three camps. You've got the thoroughly irritating nationalists of whoever's side happens to be the one who's perpetrated the Mankad or the Deepti, who are always blindly supportive of it. It doesn't matter whether they're Indian, Pakistani, English, it makes no odds. They're just feral lunatics, and they think that sport and nations are inextricably intertwined, and that if anybody criticizes something that somebody's done in your nation, you are effectively saying that everybody from that country is a scoundrel. And then you get reminded of the Amritsar massacre, which is really helpful. And, given that absolutely no member of my family going back 10 generations was ever colonialist, they were all stuck in mines or working in fields. I get kind of irritated by it. But then you get the incredibly irritating cricket hipsters, who are the ones you're talking about, who absolutely love anything that's contrary and think, isn't it brilliant that somebody's done something very clever? And then you get the spirit of cricket people who say that this is just absolutely wrong. They drive me mad as well. And I would say that while I have some sympathy with what you're saying about that's a bad way to end the game, if you do it, it shouldn't make any difference whether it's the 10th wicket of a match at Lord's or the second wicket of a match at Hove. It shouldn't do, should it? But it sort of feels like it does.
Yeah, I think if you're going to normalise and make okay this form of run out, as the MCC have done, which are the host of Lords, so it was a fitting place for it to happen, I suppose, in a sense, and has of the ICC, then I think it has to be something that you're as willing to do in the first over as the last. And I think resorting to it at a point when you think the game is gone and that you're struggling makes it seem like a more underhand or unimpressive thing to do, because they're not looking at it until the game's on the line. And I think that's where it sounds and looks a bit unfair. My final word, really, to some extent, on this debate, because I have been a bit on Twitter, which you should never do at these times, and I've poked the hornet's nest a little bit, but probably the most balanced, sensible, and admirable response to the whole thing has been by Charlie Dean, who went through the stages as follows: really, really peeved off and miffed and angry, shook hands, made a joke of it 24 hours later. Now, if everyone in the cricket world could have approached this with the same magnanimity, that would all be in a better position, wouldn't we? So well done, Charlie Dean, for actually being in the middle of it all and seeing some perspective.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I'm going to have a couple of final words on that. Spot on Charlie Dean. I don't have a problem with bowlers running people out the non-strikers end. I don't like it when batters encroach. I think it's possible that Charlie Dean had been a little bit, and I think that the only bowler that would do that was Deepti. She's a senior player, and she and Harmanpreet had clearly talked about it. And Charlie Dean knew that there was a chance that she would do that, which is why she was very careful to stay behind the line. I think there was an element of fake bowling in it because, as I said, I was commentating on it and I thought, this is really weird. Because she's done the not bowl the ball, but then she stopped like halfway through and gone back. But, that's for third umpires to decide. And if they decided that it was fine, then it was fine. So the umpire's decision is final in that respect. What I really liked was an idea from a man in the pub called Tom. And he said, he was slightly drunk at the time. He said, why doesn't they just have a batting no ball? I said, what do you mean? He says, well, if the third umpire can check the front foot of the bowler. I'll stop doing a slightly pissed voice. But he said, if they can check the front foot of the bowler, why don't they check where the batter is as well? So if they are out of the crease at the point at which, and you can make a decision of what that is, whether it's when the front foot lands or whether it's the point of delivery of the ball, doesn't really matter. That's for them to make up. Then automatically 1 run is deducted from the batting side. And I really like that idea. And also, if you score the run, obviously, if you're trying to get a quick single, you lose that run. And I thought, why not? Now, it's pointed out to me on Twitter, of course, always Twitter, that we've got enough to do already as umpires. We can't be looking at this, that, and the other. And there is a strong point. But you could send out, a third umpire. It could be somebody from, well, I don't know who it could be in club cricket. It's tricky.
Yeah, club cricket is not going to work.
But I don't know how many Deeptis happen in club cricket. But
probably
the
more.
problem of this is actually
probably
the optics
more as
of
of this week.
Well, yeah. Well, yes, and I mean, you can be pretty damn certain that Sophie Eccleston or someone like that is going to be trying to do Harmanpreet and Deepti at the first possible opportunity. And let's not forget a wonderful woman called Maeve Doomer, who did 4 Mankads in 1 match, which was an act of genuine heroism in a women's T20 a couple of years back. So I'm not going to get pompous about any of these things, but I did like the idea of the batting no ball, and you could do it with televised games. I mean, you could do it in professional cricket as well, because you could just have a third umpire standing.
I suppose it's like any one of these things, isn't it? It's like food banks or something like that. The rule should be brought in with the aspiration that it never has to exist after a certain amount of time.
Correct. That's the idea. Anyway, we will move on from the subject of Deeptis, formerly known as Mankads. You're listening to Cricket's Conversation on 99.94. Whatever your team, we have the show for you on podcast, YouTube, or on the 99.94 app. We have India, England, South Africa, West Indies, and now Sri Lanka all covered. If you want to find us, the best way is to follow us on social media at 9994DM by downloading the 9994 app or Google 99.94 on your podcasts. We speak cricket. So, England's men down in Pakistan, historic tour, 17 years in the making. They're playing 7 matches. I was a man who's quite sceptical, by the way, about the value of 7-match bilateral T20 series. But I watched the latest game, the 4th in the series of 7, and saw the devastation writ large over poor old Liam Dawson's face when England lost a nail-biter, for which he sort of blamed himself. And I realised that all these matches count and they all care. So we're not going to go into detail about the individual games that we've seen, but I'm just going to pick out a couple of people who have impressed, mostly from an England point of view, because I have to say that Pakistan's fast bowling, I don't know how they're going to work out who's in their T20 squad, because they've basically got too many options. England have got quite a lot of options, but not many of them had been firing until relatively recently, and the twin Woods certainly did. We'll look at Mark Wood in greater detail shortly. But also the batting has fired for England in fits and starts, but very encouraging signs from the likes of Harry Brook, Ben Duckett, a good debut for Will Jacks. So there's a lot there to be excited by from an England point of view, Rory.
Yeah, I think overwhelmingly, if you've watched this sort of quadrilogy in Karachi, Harry Brook has come across as the big show. He has batted with absolute timing, with imagination, with enterprise. He looks as good as you've been told. You know, this guy's averaging 100 in the county championship. He fancies white ball cricket just as much as red. He's been waiting all summer for his little takeoff. And this 7-match series appears to be it, to the point that Nasser Hussain said after the 3rd game, I think, that he was inked into their T20 side and he couldn't envisage going in without him, which is quite something for a player who had, 3 caps before this series, 4, something like that, who has been the spare batter across the board for quite a while, and into a team that around the time that Liam Livingstone was trying to break in and Sam Billings, people like that, it was known up till very recently as the hardest team in sport to break into. Owen Morgan's crack unit of white ball brothers. And Harry Brook's gone from being an outlier and maybe the next cab off the rank, as they say, to being really at the front of the queue. He seems to have so many options and such clarity about when to use them. He really does threaten to be superstar, this kid, doesn't he?
I've been stunned by him, actually. The crispness of his shots is one thing, but it's the shot selection, the way he sees exactly where the field's gone. I mean, he played a couple of shots in the 4th match, and he didn't score at a particularly massive rate, but he was actually rebuilding the innings in that game with Moeen Ali, so he reined himself in a bit, in which he managed to, I don't know how he accessed the offside boundary off really full. I mean, Yorker length deliveries, giving himself room. He's a very clean striker of the ball, and he's very, very still at the moment that he hits the ball, and those are terrific attributes. I think it's going to be interesting how they manage to fit everybody in when Ben Stokes comes back and Liam Livingstone's available and Josh Butler's available. I'd say also that, Ben Duckett's been quite the revelation because he's been out of the England setup properly, and it was when he came back in as a reserve opener, if you like, for the final Test match when Johnny Bairstow had broken his leg, and you thought, hello, this is interesting. They've gone with Ben Duckett. So they really had wanted to reintegrate him back into the England setup, and I've been delighted with the way he's played, and I'm really, really pleased for him because he's always, for my money, had a huge amount of talent and ability, but he was sent on a tour, I think, at the wrong age and the wrong tour and asked to do the wrong job. So it looks like he's back, which I'm absolutely delighted about. We'll be talking more about the T20s as the series progresses, and it's 2nd of October when they all end. So we'll run the rule properly over the batting, the bowling, the fielding in those 7 matches as we get to its conclusion. And also take a more deep look into the bowling lineup. If you love the language of cricket and you want more, then head over to the 99.94 app and you can hear all our podcasts and cricket commentary. We're adding new shows all the time and covering cricket series from all over the world. Be the first to hear all our announcements by following us on social media at 9994DM. Welcome to Cricket's Conversation. So the last thing I want to look at today, Rory, is the re-emergence of the mighty Mark Wood. My goodness me. He's been out of the side for 7 months. We all love pace. It's so exciting. The old bowled one at nearly 97 miles an hour. Now, he's had to be rested after his first game, after the first 4 overs. But it's so exciting to watch, isn't it? We saw this breakthrough happen a couple of times in the Caribbean when he bowled the fastest over, I think, that ever been recorded by an Englishman. And it just sends all England fans and pundits and journalists into raptures.
It does. We talk about extreme pace and express pace being 90. We need a 90 mile an hour option. 97 is, that is changing the game entirely. That takes it from giving a batter the hurry up in international cricket to leaving them flapping like a clubby, which is what Iftikhar Ahmed did. He wasn't up to it. He just wasn't up to the speed.
I don't blame him.
It's not something you see very often, though. I mean, 97 miles an hour just you don't see it very often. And I remember in the West Indies, in that tour where he really, really cranked back up and bowled that spell in St. Lucia, we were out there and he spoke to us before the match. He did a little round table chat and he said, I reckon I can be as quick as Shannon Gabriel, And some people sniggered. Because he at the back end of his previous stint in the England team, he had been sending down spells at 86, 87, 88, nice and quick, but nothing crazy. And Shannon Gabriel was clearing 90. And he said, I can get as quick as Gabriel. And people didn't think it was likely. Crikes, he's left Shannon Gabriel in the dust. He's bowling as quick as people have been seen bowling in an England shirt. And to do so in his first spell back after 7 months, when I heard about the elbow surgery and the comeback was pushed from the England white ball set, maybe a bit of the blast, maybe end of the summer, and then into Pakistan, I thought, ooh, we could be in trouble here with Woody. But England have to be looking now at getting Mark Wood to turn up and do his thing in a very targeted way, almost like Australia used Ryan Harris a while back. Don't bank him in and ink him in as someone for all times. When do you need him? So they need him ideally for the World T20. Then they need him for the Ashes. Everything else can be collateral in that, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and even there, when it comes to the Ashes, I think it's probably, first test, third test, fifth test, something like that. I mean, depending on the venues. Because it's such a valuable asset to have, isn't it? And we saw on these pitches in Karachi that have been mostly very good. Even bowling at 90 miles an hour, the problem with that is that pace on was just, the ball was going further and faster. But he was so quick. And when he bowled short, you could just see no one could really lay a bat in it. They couldn't time it at all. Of course, he's going to concede the occasional boundary. He's going to concede the occasional top edge. But he's going to get you wickets. And it's becoming increasingly obvious in T20 cricket, if it wasn't always, that if you want to arrest the development of a side, you need to take those wickets. And on Australian pitches, it's just going to be fascinating to see. We've never really got to see Mark Wood against Australia in Australia bowling quickly. And that's kind of the dream. It's what England have always wanted, isn't it?
Yeah, I do remember, in the white ball series that followed, not this Ashes, the previous one to that, a tour match in some game outside Sydney, I think it was, like a warm-up match. And he hustled David Warner, beat him outright for pace, which is, when he plays against those people week in, week out, Warner over there, that's not easily done. Yeah, it's you don't want to persuade yourself into the dream situation in case it never happens. But Wood and Archer in their pomp and at their absolute peak in the Ashes next summer, dare we dream?
Yeah, dream. That's the whole point. Sport is all about dreaming. Of course, we're going to dream about it, and also when we do, let's just always think of that beautifully poignant moment that was recorded of him coming sort of out the other side of his
his
anaesthetic, and he says, "I'll bowl fast again, won't I? I'll bowl fast." And it's like, oh God, you're so sweet. I mean, he is the absolute. Is he the sweetest fast bowler who ever lived? I'm going to leave you with that question, Rory, because I think it's time that we say goodbye. We'll be back before too long, a couple of days or so, when we'll be looking at whatever the hell's been happening in English cricket. There's always something. I'm just delighted we didn't have to talk about the men's high performance review this time, which I woke up in the middle of the night thinking, how am I going to get back to sleep? I thought, I know, the men's high performance review. And it did absolute wonders.
I was hoping we could get a tight 7 minutes out of the revised bonus point system, but maybe another time.
Well, another time, as Harold Pinter famously said. Thank you for listening to England Cricket on 99.94 Cricket every day. Please do rate, review and subscribe. Download the 99.94 app and follow us personally on @Norcross Cricket for me, and Rory at
the RVD. You'll find me and you'll find a wrestling chap, and you can follow us both and see which one you prefer.
How much fun that'll be. We're going to put links up for everything we do there on this podcast and beyond. Also, follow our network at 9994DM on social media. Follow for podcasts and commentary from the bat and ball world. Thanks for joining Cricket's Conversation on 99.94. We speak cricket. Goodbye.